towards the next panel discussion, and let's uncover the essential role of CIBJO Ethics Commission that works towards upholding the integrity and ethical standards in the jewelry industry. I would like to invite our moderator, Mr. Edward Johnson, to please take over the stage, and as well as our esteemed speakers to please be a part. Thank you so much. And I would request Ms. Tiffany Stephen, the President of CIBJO Ethics Commission, to please take over the stage. She will be the moderator for the session. And I request you, ma'am, to please join us.
Thank you. Welcome to our panel. I would just ask my co-panelists to join me on stage, please.
Check. While we begin this panel discussion, I have a special request to you all that tonight we all are going to visit City Palace. You might have heard that is the beauty of Pink City. Requesting each one of you to please be ready by 6:45. The conveyance, the bus that we have arranged for each one of you would be ready in the Fairmont Porsche. I hope to see you guys there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us and making it through to the very last panel of the day. We're so happy to see you here and very happy to be here in Jaipur. Always a treat to be at CIBJO. So first of all, a huge thank you to Gaetano and the people on the ground here in Jaipur, everyone affiliated with CIBJO who worked hard all year to make this happen. And it's great to be together again for the first time since 2019 for us. So this is quite a treat. I'm Tiffany Stevens. I am the chair of the Ethics Commission here at CIBJO and also on the board of directors of the organization. And in my day job, I am the CEO and general counsel of the Jeweller's Vigilance Committee, which is a US-based organization that focuses on ethics and policy for the US market and all of those organizations operating within the US market. So I'm going to tell you what we're going to be tackling up here today and hopefully discussing with you. But first, I would just ask my wonderful co-panelists to briefly introduce themselves. And Lisa, we can start with you.
Hello? Okay. Hello, everybody. First off, I want to echo Tiffany's thanks to Gaetano and to all of you for being here. It's really quite wonderful to be in Jaipur. This is actually my first trip, and it's always a delight and an honor to be at CIBJO, as well as to be working with both Tiff and Sara, who are key members of the JVC, and they are partners that we so love to work with. My name is Lisa Koenigsberg, and I am the founder and president of Initiatives in Art and Culture, which is an organization based in New York. Amongst the things we do directly relevant to CIBJO's focus are webinar series, major annual conference, a couple of conferences actually, and this past year we were thrilled that Gaetano joined us in July. My colleagues here were also involved in the program. And am I? Yeah, I think I'll come back. Yeah, okay. So we'll explain the whole relationship once we get to that part of the program.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Sara Yood. I am Deputy General Counsel at the Jewelers Vigilance Committee. Along with Tiffany, JVC works to ensure legal compliance in the industry. And my background is actually, I am an intellectual property law specialist. So that's actually what I went to law school to do. And I'm so thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you today about intellectual property law and about why protecting the human intellect is really important.
Mr. Ray, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Sabyasachi Ray. I am the Executive Director of the Gem and Jewellery Export Promotion Council. And Gem and Jewellery Export Promotion Council in the jewellery sector, we work with ethics, right? Of course, we are the Kimberley Process Import-Export Authority in India, and also we see that the supply chain protocol, how they are maintained. We work very closely with RJC. Not only that, we work very closely with sustainability goals in terms of our sector, how it will be maintained, and in how the back end can be organized based on this. So we have done a lot, development of communities, the healthcare of these people, and also how to see that the small scale businesses scale up their business through technology by creating common facility centers, and etc. So if you look at India, the development of India in terms of ethical treatment of the people around, of the product, and how the supply chain integrity, GJEPC is one organization who is working not only in India and also with other organizations in the world.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us. So we're coming together today under the umbrella of the Ethics Commission, but this is actually a multi-part series that was the brainchild of Lisa, but also a partnership in all of these different cities between CIBJO, JVC, and IAC. And Lisa's going to speak to the concept in just a moment, but and what we've learned so far in the different cities where we've presented. We stayed focused on intellectual property as a large subject, and then we've applied it in each of these different localities. We've brought a different kind of substantive focus to each conversation, and then we've supplemented that or enriched that with someone from the local community or the country where we're presenting to bring their own individual and country-specific experience to the conversation. So we're excited to do that today in India, in Jaipur, and we think it will be pretty interesting. So in just a second, I'm going to turn things over to Lisa so she can tell us a little bit more about the concept and what we've learned so far in the different cities. Next up will be Sara, and she's going to give us some highlights from the ethics report that was released by CIBJO a few weeks ago. We just wanted to draw your attention to it because it's really dense and well researched and written, and we just want to make sure if you didn't have time to read the whole thing, that you get some highlights from it because it really frames the whole series very nicely. And then we'll hear from Mr. Ray about some of the applications of IP issues here in India, and we've earmarked cultural heritage and process ownership as two topics that we'll touch upon, although I think we'll have a conversation on stage and with you, and we might also touch on some other subjects. And then if by some strange chance you want to stay in this room any longer, we will take some questions at the very, very end as well. So with that, thank you again for being with us. And Lisa, would you like to tell us about this whole concept?
So the idea for this multi-part series focusing on intellectual property is the product actually of a collaboration that Gaetano Cavaliere very kindly invited IAC to undertake with CIBJO. And so what we do is every year we identify, if you will, a large topic, and then the idea is to explore that topic perhaps 4 times during the year in different places, with bringing to bear different perspectives, and clearly the international dimension is key to the varied perspectives that are brought to bear. And the first idea, if you will, that we picked up in order to look at for multi-part series was intellectual property. It's actually something we had been talking about doing, and then there was this great collaboration, so it seemed the perfect opportunity, as well as the fact that there would be an Ethics Commission report coming up. So it also allowed us to dovetail realizing an idea with an actual important task that had to be accomplished. So we started exploring this concept, if you will, of intellectual property in New York at IAC's conference, right? That was the first one. And, excuse me, I've been awake for 2 days. And so that was the first one. And within it, we explored definitions of terms like copyright, trademark, patent, and those were, if you will, outlined by Sara, providing, if you will, a framework for how they're used within the United States. And then there was some robust conversation because we had with us 2 designers. In one case, the designer was accompanied by her intellectual property lawyer. So there were a couple of concrete cases discussed. In one case, Bliss Lau, who was an independent designer and whose rights had been infringed upon, she was on the one hand in the right, and on the other hand without significant resources, which basically plays a factor, as we'll see in each of the case studies. And then, how do you say? There's a brand, if you will. I guess everyone wants to be a brand, I guess, called Ox, and very innovative design, and the design had underpinnings in some technical innovations that could be patented. And so there's their patent for their design. And so that was one, also a contrast of different kinds of protection that you seek, but also in the case of Ox, they did pursue and get the patent, and that was, if you will, a weapon in their arsenal, and their lawyer was part of the presentation. So we then moved on to Vicenza and had a conversation looking again, or framed, if you will, by defining these concepts, but present also were 2 lawyers, both from Studio Torta, both of whom represented Roberto Coin and other brands at the same time. And they stressed that point because they were making observations often that were applicable to more than one circumstance. And so one of the things that became clear is that in the United States, arguably there is better protection for technical innovation, something that, if you will, is subject to patent. So that's arguably more functionally oriented. In Europe, the conclusion was that there is better protection in certain ways for design because you can pursue it more cost effectively. It kicks in almost immediately. So even, if you will, before you file for having a group of designs covered. So, but the other thing that became clear, and this is of course no surprise, but nonetheless revelatory, is that in both situations, circumstance favors the affluent. That often accompanies size, but not necessarily. But it is very expensive to be vigilant with regard to intellectual property in terms of surveying the landscape, understanding who is encroaching upon what you have done, your work, etc., and marshaling a robust effort to create that presence, which is more important to have that presence before you can really be robustly protected in Europe. But on the other hand, in the States, given the other challenges, you have that same issue. So I guess you would say those were some of the major conclusions that we drew. And the thought here is that we will now include your perspective and be able to have an even more comprehensive view. And then we've talked about actually a fourth session that will look at artificial intelligence and social media and, if you will, amorphous product, things like, if you will, the controversy over the digital Birkin. So that's the plan for the remainder of the series. I was very honored that we have this collaboration with CIBJO and absolutely delighted to work, as always, with JVC, and honored that you have joined us today.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, and I'll turn it over to Sara.
I just wanted to give some credit to Steve Benson as well, who was at the beginning of the conversation thinking about the importance of this topic. And he brought in so much research and such an incredible perspective as we were planning this. So thank you, Steve, for your efforts.
I second that emotion.
Lisa, thank you so much for clarifying the takeaways and framing this multi-month, multi-country effort so beautifully. So Sara is going to touch on the report that we produced for you, and that's publicly available to all of you if you would like to read further. But over to Sara.
Sure. So thanks, everybody. As you know, all of the different commissions at CIBJO often release special reports in advance of Congress. And ours this year for the Ethics Commission was specifically focused on intellectual property law. And excuse me for using notes, but it's as Tiffany said, it's a pretty dense and comprehensive report. So I want to make sure that I get all of the points right that we'd like to make. So in case we've been talking in circles about intellectual property and you don't actually know what that is, I just want to make sure that everyone in the room understands that intellectual property as a concept refers to products of the intellect. So it essentially covers the ideas that come out of the human brain. And intellectual property laws that exist protect those ideas, inventions, and creativity for their creators. So the report delves into the various forms of intellectual property. Not all types of IP are suitable for every single product that the jewelry industry makes. So understanding the difference between these categories can be really important. So I'll very briefly just explain that copyright can protect design and expression, artistic expression. So copyright is often used for jewelry designs, but it's also used for music and literary compositions and paintings and things like that. Trademark protects its symbols, names, words, or other identifiers that distinguish the source of goods or services. So that can be your brand name, your logo, your brand identity. Some very famous examples of trademark in the jewelry industry include the blue color of the Tiffany and Company box. That blue itself is a trademark that identifies Tiffany and Company as the source of those goods. There's also patents which protect inventions, and as Lisa alluded to, there's actually two different types of patents. There can be design patents or utility patents. So those utility patents protect inventions. Design patents can protect certain unique designs. And as we said, we discovered when having this conversation in Vicenza that in the EU, design protection is much more easily achievable than it is in the United States. There's also a couple of other things, trade secrets, which can protect some confidential business information, and trade dress, which can refer to like the shape of a product. So, for example, the Van Cleef Alhambra is protected by trade dress. So, and that's just based on the shape, not even of the four-leaf clover. So it's also important to know that obviously these rights are protected by country level laws. There's different interplay between countries when you're thinking about this. So understanding how your rights extend in other countries is really important. We touched on that in the report. And we talked a little bit about enforcement. Enforcement itself can really differ widely. In some places, bringing a lawsuit to enforce your rights can cost lots and lots of money. In other places, it can be more affordable. So sometimes an international intellectual property strategy might include suing in one country versus another, simply because it's going to cost you less money to do so. And then I think finally, we touched about the importance of talking about intellectual property rights and intellectual property law in the jewelry industry. We all know that jewelers, designers, businesses are subject to copying, and that this is pretty rampant in the industry. And so the importance of this series also served to highlight the education needed in the industry to make sure. We think that if designers get this information a little bit earlier in their careers, about what is and is not legal, understanding the boundaries of intellectual property law, that can really help to serve them for their future careers, to make sure they're not unintentionally infringing on other people's rights, and that they're pretty aware of what their abilities are. And so we suggest in the report that CIBJO continue these activities to advocate for streamlined and cost-effective legal procedures, to provide continued education for intellectual property law, and continue foster these collaborations and partnerships with legal experts to provide accessible avenues for addressing infringement cases.
And can I just add one thing? I was reminded of the fact that one of the things that came up in all of the conversations was the things that can be done to protect intellectual copyright that are not necessarily legal maneuvers, but they are about vigilance and proactivity. So, for example, being very attentive to marketplaces like Etsy, to see what is coming online, to be very attentive to particularly Instagram, for example. So these are things that are not necessarily legal avenues, but you can take action and initiate something without, if you will, pursuing a legal suit. And that kind of thinking in a multifaceted fashion fits very well with today's discussions, but also I think is an aspect of education that we might not think of as readily, because it is really thinking across enterprise, across disciplines, if you will, but critically important.
Thank you. Did you have anything? Okay. Thank you both so much. So bringing all these concepts here to India, and thinking about how the ethics of intellectual property applies, there are certainly many examples we could use, but I was hoping that maybe you could speak to the cultural heritage piece and also the process.
Yes, this is, as far as India goes, it is very important that how, because we are a very old civilization and jewelry is in our culture for the last 5,000 years. So if you see how the jewelry has developed in our country, a lot of ways and forms and procedures, what is being used internationally to gain the price advantage in terms of those products. So I'll just give you a very small example. All of you know that in the diamond there's a concept called a flat cut, with the 8 facets. So that flat cut, very few people know that it was originated in India. It is called a rose cut here. So that way, these type of things, which originally was invented in India, somewhere down the line, we have found out that though this is being used, but these are all community-based techniques, and those communities should get the benefits out of this. Now today, if you go to a state called Gujarat in our country, so you have, I do not want to name those companies for brevity's sake, because those are companies which has come from communities. So each of the companies have developed their own way and procedures of manufacturing of diamonds, and based on that they have got the advantage. They are already, because they have now become very big, they are already doing the patents or securing the patents. But there are some communities, like today what we have done in India through the National Council of Applied Economic Research. First we mapped the communities or the clusters throughout India. So we have mapped some 400 clusters. Among that 190 clusters are manufacturing clusters. So we have found out there is somewhere, let's say in Karaikudi, somewhere in Bengal, so there are certain kind of techniques by which they manufacture the jewelry, and internationally we have found out those are rampantly used by jewelry manufacturing in other places of the world and getting the price advantage. So one of the things we have started in a very small experimental level in one of the clusters is trying to find out the geographical indicators. So if we get the GI tag, once we get the GI tag, then that community will get the benefit of that patenting of that place. So this is a very in a nascent stage, and I'm happy to hear that CIBJO is working on this, and of course we'll be also sharing data, and also we would like to see that how internationally all these community-based knowledge or community-based patents can be developed, so that whatever the economic advantage it comes out of those clusters or those techniques of those communities should be derived or should be taken up by those communities for their development and for their upliftment.
That's really interesting, both mapping the craft and making sure the communities benefit, and then also the ways that India is pushing technology forward in so many industries, including ours, at the other end of the spectrum too, making sure that credit and economic benefit is given on a continual basis. Did you want to speak to the process control at all, or?
See, that is exactly what I'm telling. To get a GI, geographical indicator, we have to first map the process. We have to show that how this process originated, from where it has originated. A proper independent body has to do the research and to submit a paper, and from which communities are developed, that means the route where it is developed, and from there it is submitted to the international body. They accept it. Based on their acceptance only, they give you the patent, and that patent you can use in future. So it's a pretty long process. It is not like just in, let's say we understand that where you come from the, let's say the European and far Western dispensation. If in any corporate or any big brand, this process or these techniques or the designs originate, you have already a well-defined process, mechanism through which those things are mapped, those things are submitted, and you get the patent legally. But here, as this has happened, organically in the communities and the society. Nothing is mapped. So we have to go back. We have to go back from where it started and how it is, and also when the international body looks at it, they also look at it. If we are given a patent, they also search throughout the world whether this is being given to this community or some communities there who have developed those types of things or not. After verification only, they give it. So this process mapping is part of that. In fact, in process mapping, each of the small things have to be mapped and has to be looked into that how from the community is it developed, because it has a lot of cultural bondings and a lot of, when you talk about design, they have you will find that when we go deep down into those communities, the design sensibilities has come based on the culture where they are and the surroundings where they lived in, and that is how the process have developed. So this entire mapping and then proving that each of the process are originator of that place is a effort in itself. And of course, we can share with you in future how that can be as a CIBJO, this thing we can develop in other parts of the world and we can take in the model world.
Also, I noticed it's interesting. I wonder if you agree with what I'm saying. It sounds like you're talking about the rights of the community in these innovations. And that's so different than in the West, we think about the individual who created it all, as if there was one person who is creating something all alone. Am I picking up on that, right? That you are talking about benefiting the community, not just identifying one person who has created these techniques?
You are absolutely right. You are all sitting in Jaipur. You just go maybe 200 kilometers from here. So there's a technique called Thewa. So this Thewa technique, one of the NGOs, basically one of the ladies, to be specific, she went there. She was a designer. So she found out, she saw that how the community through glasses, they're developing this kind of jewelry. And she took the owners of, researching about it, taking it to the world, getting the patent. It's a long process. The book is also written about that. So you are absolutely right that this is, when in India you reverse it. The whole patent is developed in the community-based concept throughout the community. And I think I had read some, books or some papers on this, that in Italy also there are cluster-based techniques which are there. I do not know whether they have patented or not, but of course Italy has experimented with the cluster-based developing of the jewelry concept. And in fact, whatever you are seeing, France also have done to an extent. I have seen that how they have developed the handmade community, how they have also researched, they have formed a group, and how that had come out. All these things everybody is doing around the world, but it is exactly where you come from is that is the corporates where they have a mechanism, they have a means, but we are talking about communities, small jewelers, through which the process is developed, and let us patent that, give them the right, legal right, and let them enjoy the output from that.
Thank you. So back to the cultural heritage piece. When we were preparing for the panel, Lisa brought up some really interesting points about cultural heritage and cultural appropriation. So I'm hoping I can bring you two into conversation on that topic. Lisa, did you want to share some of your thoughts?
Well, I'm wondering actually what your thoughts are on this, because, the challenge of the way we currently use this word appropriation often presents a challenge to the idea that influence is often integral to any kind of creation. So how are we making use of something? Is it in an appropriate way, or is it derisive and, if you will, theft? But at the same time, and of course, we are in this extraordinary place surrounded by millennia of cultural accomplishment. We know the criticality of the influence of the past. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on those issues.
This patent is, of course, in the whole world also, it may be some 20, 30 years concept, but this whole, as you're right, that this culturally what has been developed organically into a form of society in a design form or in a manufacturing form using different kind of techniques. And we have, if you research or if you go, like just I'll give you a very small example, a concept called filigree, So we have found out that filigree is developed in some part in eastern India where it has generated. Of course, that has been refined and now it is being used in a very refined form in other parts of the world. But again, when it is being used by those parts, the recognition has also not come to that part where it has originated. So these are issues, of course, you have touched upon this issue, but these are very vast issues. It will require a lot of research before you reach that legal, because in law, everything you have to argue and have to put it in front of the court to accept them in terms of proof, etc. This will require its own time and its own connotation, because you have to go back to history also.
In copyright law in the US, we have this concept called savoir-faire. It's obviously a French term, but it basically refers to elements of a work that can't be copyrighted because they are too generic for the topic. So to take a very American example, let's say you were going to make a Western style movie. The things like you might have a cowboy on a horse, you might have a saloon with saloon doors that move back and forth, you might have a shootout, you might have tumbleweeds. All of those things are considered generic to the idea itself, and you can't copyright them. You can't stop somebody else from using those concepts because they are generic to the idea of a Western film. And I think that's really relevant to this conversation, to talking about, what kind of design elements and community-owned things, how do you protect that while also leaving it open for other people to use?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. But today I'll just give you an example. If you just watch a Picasso, you can just looking at the picture, you can tell this is Picasso. So somebody is copying that technique and using that kind of, then it will be told a fake, isn't it? So the same way you see Van Gogh, the stylization of how the painting is done, how it is painted, etc. So that is what we are talking about. Okay, if you do not give the commercial recognition, also commercial, but at least you can give the recognition that this has come from this culture or this place, etc. I think that will be a good thing to, of course, because the world is also growing very smaller with internet and etc. You know where it is, so you have Wikipedia, you can instantly go and study. So the same way, you can always work on this, that at least this has come from there, the origin, and if not patent, at least some recognition can happen through that.
Any other thoughts on cultural heritage? Yeah. Any other last thoughts from the panel before we engage with the audience a little bit?
I wonder if you want to raise the issue that Studio Torta raised in concern about protection having to do with marks and things like that.
Oh, right. Please.
So one of the concerns that was raised by the two lawyers from this Italian firm, Studio Torta, and also a third woman who works very closely with Mr. Cohen, is the challenge presented by the products of certain countries, and I will say that the United States would be among them, although we do mark for heritage. She also mentioned India as presenting challenges because the absence of marks do not allow for the identification of the source country of the infringing goods. And so that was an issue that was raised that, effectively was one that's, I think, extremely important because I know you've just introduced a hallmarking system, but how do we protect and how do we give people the tools to understand origin, which may not be the same thing as authorship, but is also, of course, related to it? How do you detect it? I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
See, again, we were, at least when the hallmarking system was coming in our country, and we, of course, have not been admitted in the Vienna Convention, and we were looking at how the convention formulates its procedures, how there is control, the control mark, whatever they're giving, all these things I think our government have studied, and As you know, India, we have come out with a very, very unique solution, which is called HUID. So HUID is every jewelry today in India. Every jewelry, go to any shop, it is a compulsory now. There is a small, mark there or number there, which is a computer number. So you just put it, and then you go to the system in the national, just like SA, we have the Bureau of Indian Standards. You go to this site, so you can exactly find where it is manufactured, what has been declared. Anywhere in the world, you can go and you can check. I know the GI is having similar kind of system, but here in our jewelry, this has been put. So when you are talking about the origin of a good, so in India now it is very easy. So if tomorrow you want to do that, you can tell your supplier to do this, they will do it. Anywhere in the world, you can just check that mark, and in the site it is there. And it is being controlled by a public site, which is called a Bureau of Indian Standards, which is a Government of India company. And we have checked with World Gold Council. HUID is a very unique system which is being followed because our country is very vast country. Millions of jewelry is sold. Every year some 900 to 1000 tons of gold is converted into jewelry. So for government it was a challenge that in a very remote village, whether a person who is buying the jewelry, whether it is giving right or wrong, how the consumer will know. So you reverse the system. So today a consumer, so it is legally so valid, the consumer, that mark, what has been put by the jeweler, seeing the mark, they can exactly find out how much grammage of gold is there, what is the purity of gold is there, what is the design mark is there, everything is there. And if any misdeclaration is there, that is a criminal offense in terms of law in our country. So it is like this. So reverse the entire system. So in India, what we try to do is always public based. So one of the emphasis of the government is digital based infrastructure. What in G20 also we have already worked to share with this infrastructure. This is called a digital public infrastructure. This is part of that.
So there are many things that in the last few days in India, I have thought, I'd really like to take this home with me. And I'd like to take that home. I wish we could do this in the US. In the US, there's no requirement to mark for heritage at all. If you do, you must include a federally registered trademark, but searching the database is almost impossible to find the maker. So maybe we'll take that one.
Thank you, and I think World Gold Council is already preaching that you take this system from India. I don't know, you have to go to the government to see whether they will share it or not.
Another beautiful example of the technological innovation meeting the heritage of craft and skill. That's really interesting.
Well, actually, that brings up something from the panel we had prior to launching the intellectual property one, which had to do with cultural heritage, if you will, and also passing initiatives along to the next generation. And one of the things that was addressed are these extraordinary techniques, minakari in enamel, for example, and to whom that is taught and to whom that is not taught, and how critical, if you will, passing on skills that relate to cultural heritage and the ability to craft it, that these are, if you will, akin to a form of natural resource, and that without passing them on, without teaching them to the next generation, without stewardship of these things, we risk their loss, and that would be a dreadful one indeed for all of us.
Yeah, certainly a host of ethical issues about how it's done, when it's not done. That's really super interesting. Any other thoughts before we take some questions?
I think this is, of course, I was not aware about this report, IP report, so it's good that we have come to know. And we'll also try to utilize in India, because this community-based or heritage-based, techniques or design techniques are always there. While we are sitting, the most of the things that here in and around you go in this Jaipur, you will find that so many community-based, heritage-based design techniques are there. So we'll look into it at how we can utilize to just see that this community is at least known to the world that these are the techniques which have been invented by this community. That's all.
Thank you. So anyone in the room want to have a comment or a question before we wrap up?
Doug Hucker.
Sarah wants to take it home. I'd like to take a look at it too. For the registry system, like that is essentially a hallmark system, where the piece is made, how you can research it, and how you can look at it. Can we get the information on that?
Yes. I will send you. It is called Bureau of Indian Standards. Like the International Standards Organization is ISO. Here it is called BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards. So you can go to the site www.bis.org. See B for Bombay, I for India, and S for Switzerland. So bis.org. And there you'll find that you go to the hallmarking system, you'll find everything. Because it is a very consumer-faced site. The consumers, how they can invent, see this, how to check it, what are the things, everything you'll find there.
Thank you. I saw a lot of people writing that down. Thank you for sharing it.
Actually, there is one other thing, which is that part of the agreement that we have is that both CIBJO and IAC post all of these proceedings on our website, and we also do an email about them. So one of the things that I will make sure to do is to get that specific information and make sure that we include that both in our posting on our website as well as in the announcement that goes out to all of our rather extensive blast list.
Great. I think I saw some other hands. Iris? Sorry, Jen, you're first. Jen, you're first.
I have the mic, so I'll go.
Possession is 9/10 of the law.
For the gentleman, you mentioned that certain communities are known for certain crafts and that India ensures that they benefit. How exactly does India make sure that those communities financially benefit? Is it a tax that's applied nationally? How do they benefit?
Okay, see, I have not studied it fully, but I'll tell you something. I met two gentlemen from Etsy. You all know that Etsy is an e-commerce site. You can go to that site and you can find out that Etsy is working. Etsy is only handcrafted, not only jewelry, all things. So you go to the site, Etsy has the researchers on ground to find exactly which community, how they're making. And I'm very happy to see that Etsy is giving the return back. So when you buy in states also, Etsy at least sources it authentically from that community itself and is sending it to the country. So at least if that happens, we are not telling any law, anything. At least if you are selling the goods, looking at that community, I know that consumers will try to find out to that community. Today, the wine, how you are trying to find out from which handcrafted wine you are trying to get from which community, etc. All same way, it can also happen in our kind of community-based thing where the consumer should be aware and they will find their way. I do not think that laws or taxes will benefit them.
Okay, over here.
Hi, thank you. What you are saying about the Western type of movies may apply to what's happening in the Colorstone origin reports. And I know that the JVC, I think, and I don't know, I think somebody else, but anyway, has done some work with AGL from New York, the lab. That's correct, right? Like, you've used AGL system as for promoting some or explaining some kind of origin determination. Is that correct? And then I go forward with my question.
No, I don't think that's correct.
I think I've seen that on the internet on the Gary Ruskin newsletter, isn't that? But anyway, it's not a big deal. AGL, I'm reading. On his website it says our AGL Classic, and it's trademark TM, designation combined with various sources, blah, blah, blah. A stone must have both attributes to receive an AGL Classic trademark designation. If a stone has one but not the other, we will not issue an AGL Classic. It is kind of branding for special stone. And then it says, AGL prefers this approach to using historic terms such as pigeon blood or royal blue, which are presently being commercialized to such an extent that the glory of the historic meaning is virtually lost. Somehow they're probably not wrong. And then you go to another lab, which is called GRS, which a lot of people know because they have kind of invaded the world with their reports everywhere. And then they have something else, it's called the GRS type pigeon blood ruby or GRS type royal blue sapphire. So now, related to what you said about a Western movie, that you have some specific scenes or whatever, which are apparently prevented from being used under other names, what are the legal, at least in the US obviously, and since it's your topic, what are the limitations of using all these names that they are using and some of them abusing, and AGL itself in New York using with the trademark?
Sure. I can briefly answer your question, and then I'm happy to speak afterwards as well to get some more information. But the sans affaire concept, the Western movie, that applies to copyright law. So copyright, which protects artistic expression. And in that situation, we're talking about trademark law, which is an entirely different set of regulations and laws and protection. So that concept doesn't apply in trademark, and I'm happy to talk with you afterwards about how to think about that.
And I would also just plug the JVC on the trademark side of things. One of the things that we do to look out for the industry all the time, because there is concept of intellectual property that applies to like individual contribution or individual economic gain, but then there are also these broader concepts that we've talked about that are more systemic. And one thing that the JVC does, because of a lawsuit that we had in the 80s, we gained legal standing. And so we try to protect the US industry from any general terms being trademarked in a way that would be harmful to other players. So a super broad term, one company can't claim that. Every week we look and we often challenge and litigate these general claims when people try to grab them. And we have, I think, a 100% success rate, at least since I've been around, with watching Sara do her thing, of knocking that down. So just sharing that. And did we have one more? Oh, yours. Yep.
Just a comment. I think, Gaetano, thank you for bringing us all on the stage today and giving us the opportunity to talk about these important topics. But also, Tiff, I wanted to congratulate what GJEPC has done. You know, I've been seeing the work over the years under your leadership, you know, together with Sara, and it has had an amazing impact on the industry, and we sometimes take that for granted. So I thought maybe it's India, maybe it's the spirit of India that always kind of makes you reflect. But I think, you know, I just want to say I applaud your work. We applaud the way you engage. We've learned a lot. We come to you when we have critical questions. And I think it's amazing when I hear Mr. Sabyasachi speak, because I've learned so much. We've been writing down about what's happening in India, which, you know, I've been here so many times, I never even reflected about. So great learning curve. And last but not least, Lisa, I think you're the most courageous woman of this industry. You're so determined to make the change. Thank you so much.
That's exceedingly
Too kind. Thank you so much.
I wanted to quickly say one thing in response to the latest comment, which is there is another thing, which is, if you will, the conflation of something that exists as legal system, trademarking, patent, whatever, the verbiage that goes along with that, and something that is trying to assert itself as a third-party certifier. And they are two very different things. And the criticality of that difference speaks to also the work that the Nomenclature Committee is doing, and shows how interrelated a lot of the tasks or the challenges that different groups are facing, because at the end of the day, understanding what given words mean is essential even to being able to take a defensive or self-defensive strategy or understand what infringement and encroachment is. That all sounded rather negative, and I should have been much more positive, which is allows one to vigorously champion one's own creativity. But all of this terminology work is quite related, and to try to assert something as a legal strategy when it's a question of definition, as we all know, the definition game is played by everybody, and so care has to be used with terms. It's critical.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful point to end on. Thank you so much to my co-panelists, and thank you to all of you for being in the room with us and for a wonderful day. Thank you.
Hello, excuse me. Just a reminder: we're leaving tonight to the dinner at the City Palace. Buses are going to be leaving at 6:45. There's a lot of traffic getting into the city, so please be ready and downstairs at the entrance by 6:30. You don't want to miss the arrival at the palace.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And would request our president to please take over and felicitate with the memento to the speakers and the moderator. Thank you. And I would request each one of your presence with us, because I have three very important announcements to be made. There is a high tea that is set up right outside. You can join us for the high tea. Next, the bus will leave from the venue at 6:30. Please be there in the Porsche. And the last and the most important one, tomorrow's session that is supposed to be by 8:30. I request everyone to please be here in the banquet at 8:30 tomorrow in the morning. Thank you so much. That's all.